Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm super excited to be able to finally bring you guys a review of this Black Mamba Legendary Warrior KO and upscale of Transformers The Last Knight Voyager class Dinobot Scorn. Now for those of you looking to add this guy to your collection before he becomes extinct, he is currently available in very limited quantities over at the Icon store, so for that of course I shall pack a link down in the description box below, as well as a discount code for which you can use across the entire site. Now in my opinion, the original Voyager Scorn that we got released as part of the Transformers 5 toy line is probably one of the most underrated figures of all time. I think it's absolutely terrific. Truly captured his appearance from Transformers Age of Extinction, specifically in that Spinosaurus alt mode. It was a vast improvement over the deluxe Age of Extinction counterpart, and really is a figure of which I find to be incredibly underpraised. So when I saw that Black Mamba were in fact going to be reissuing this guy in a much larger format, honestly this guy is enormous, as well as fully decking him out in his more movie accurate colour scheme, and of course adding some improvements, I knew this was a figure I had to add to the collection. But it did in fact actually become out of stock incredibly quickly, so almost 2 years after its release I've finally been able to pick one up, and honestly I'm absolutely astonished, especially in terms of the overall quality. Now we'll waste no time at all and of course get stuck straight here into the details. You can see that for the most part, if you own the original Voyager figure, you can literally see that this is essentially just an upscale. There are a few minor differences here in bot mode which I'll mainly point out during transformation, but for the most part the sculpt is the exact same as the original version. You can see, albeit this time painted so much better, literally looks as if though he's actually stepped straight off the screen. I really love this almost metallic brown paint app that the entire figure has been coated literally in head to toe with. I haven't actually been able to find any unpainted plastic on this guy, which is just terrific. You can see the sculpt work there for the torso region looks excellent. I really like the asymmetrical design going on for the shoulders. You can see of course we have a much more standard humanoid arm for this side, and then that gigantic tail whip that we see him use throughout Age of Extinction, which I think is just absolutely incredible. And once again the paintwork for a knockoff is just exquisite. You can see here for the night skirt region, I think the proportions on this have all turned out really nicely. And then finally taking a look here towards the shins of the figure, you can once again see the sculpt work continues with some really awesome knight-esque boots here, which once again I just think look incredible. Now as we spin our attention here to the back, we still do have the Spinosaurus fins, albeit I actually don't find it to look too bad. I personally do in fact actually like to deploy this one. Of course you can sit it more flush here on the back, but it gives him a little bit more of a fierce look, and that was definitely the vibe that I got from these particular Dinobots whenever they were on screen. Some of the major differences here towards the back when in comparison to the original version is that the foot of the Dino mode can in fact now completely compressed, which creates for a much cleaner profile, which I think is awesome. And then as we spin our attention here to the top, you can see that we do have these added components which mainly play a more key role when we transform him up into dino form. Now in terms of articulation, surprisingly really nicely done. So here for the head we get a ball joint which can look up, down, tilt side to side, as well as rotate left to right. Both of the shoulders are on very heavy duty ratchet joints which can rotate the full 360. We of course get ratchet joints here out to the sides. The tail whip is articulated at various different segments, so we get a hinge joint here, and then a hinge joint here at the tip, and of course you can rotate that there at where I presume the bicep would be, and the same also applies here to this one, albeit of course we do get a wrist rotation, as well as the fingers are now fully individually articulated. Here for the hips, these can ratchet forwards that far, which is awesome. Sadly not back to the greatest extent due to the nature of the design, but he can of course hinge out to the sides only on a hinge joint, not on a ratchet joint, and considering how big and bulky he is, I would have maybe liked to have seen that actually incorporated into this. We do get a full rotation here just above the knee, a 90-degree bend here at the knee, and finally the foot here can pivot forwards and backwards as well as rock side to side. But once again, this is certainly an area of which I wish had a ratchet joint, as this is merely on a hinge joint, and it really doesn't take much for this guy to in fact actually topple over due to him having some die cast here in the chest. Now another improvement they've made, honestly literally a Black Mamba special, is that they've added some LEDs to the head which truly do make all of the difference. So as we just turn our attention to the back, you can see we've got this switch that when toggled will in fact illuminate, or should illuminate, a super vibrant blue. Now it may not be coming across on camera that well due to the intense lighting of the review station, but honestly this truly does bring this guy to life, and honestly I'm actually quite surprised at how well this has turned out. It definitely does resemble what we saw on screen, and once again, much like some of the other LED features that I've discussed over on the channel, truly is the icing on the cake. I think that looks awesome, and it's really cool how literally the entire front section of the visor illuminates blue, and then it begins to slowly fade out here towards the tip, once again much like we saw in the film. So definitely a really nice touch for what is already a fantastic looking figure. So without further ado, let's turn to some size comparisons, and then of course we'll proceed into his dino mode. So first up, here we have the Black Mamba Scorn compared next to the largest movie Grimlock I own, that being the G Creations Wrath, and you can just see how enormous this figure truly is. I was not expecting it to in fact actually tower over Grimlock, which truth be told I don't in fact actually think is accurate to the film. I did believe that these guys were more or less eye to eye in terms of scale, so once again perhaps there is another alternative Grimlock, maybe by Black Mamba out there, that does scale a little little better with this guy, but as far as an actual presence is concerned, he is enormous. Really does dwarf pretty much any of the mainline figures that I actually own, and it would also be rather interesting for a company such as G Creations to in fact actually do their own spin on Scorn, as of course Grimlock was a complete brand new sculpt from head to toe, whereas Scorn here by Black Mamba is essentially just an upscale. So it would be nice to see once again a complete brand new original sculpt. I believe the only other version that we will ever see of this guy will be in fact if Hasbro do decide to do a Studio Series version, but in regards to Dino Mode, I actually don't think they'll scale too badly. And here we have him compared next to the miniature Optimus Prime that also came packaged with that Grimlock, as well as the original Last Night Voyager Scorn, and you could just see the stark difference in terms of scale as well as of course colorization when in comparison to the original version. They truly have done something super impressive with this guy, and truth be told, I actually think the scale between the small Optimus that comes with Grimlock is actually pretty accurate to the scale we saw in the film between this Scorn, so that does create for a pretty awesome diorama, and I'll be sure to post some images of these two guys battling it out, potentially towards the beginning of this video. So with everything just about wrapped up here for Robot Mode, without further ado, we'll proceed into the transformation, as it is essentially the exact same as what we saw with the original version of Scorn. I'll do a slightly different transformation segment for this guy, but whilst at the same time, still hopefully giving you guys a detailed tutorial. So without further ado, let's get this guy fully transformed from his robot form into, of course, his Spinosaurus dino form. And so here we have Scorn fully transformed up into the Dino Mode, and honestly this is just absolutely enormous. It won't even fit in the full frame of my camera or my review station, so once again, much like Robot Mode, I'll try my absolute best in order to showcase as much detail as possible, but just note he is enormous. So we'll very quickly start here by taking a look at the head sculpt. That in my opinion just looks absolutely incredible. Once again, taken from that original Last Night sculpt, but this time enlarged with the new paint outs. Truly does look incredible. You can see the teeth all individually sculpted, looking great. I think the paintwork looks fantastic. You can also see some lovely detailing there for the eyes. And whilst actually on the topic of the eyes, if you do bring in a screwdriver and if we open up his mouth, you can see a tiny little switch way back in there that if you actually push this just like so, much like the Robot Mode head, it will indeed toggle the eyes, and I think that looks super cool. Once again, brings him to life and was a feature that they didn't have to include, but I'm super glad they did. Now, the batteries, in all honesty, I actually don't know where they would be stored. I think they are in this tiny little compartment, so if they do run out, this is the area of which I think you actually have to unscrew. Personally, I'm not entirely sure, as they haven't died on me just yet and did come pre-installed, but that, once again, is a very nice feature as we take a look here towards the spinal region. I think that looks incredible. Of course, we've got these massive spikes going on here at the top, so I'll very quickly just raise the camera up. You can see the paintwork on this, much like the rest of the figure, also looks fantastic. I think it comes together really nicely. We can also see some of those additional panels that we saw in Robot Mode, so of course they do in fact conceal this region, an area which went slightly missed on the original version, which is great to see. You can see, sadly, we still do have the arm just hanging off here towards the bottom, but honestly, I don't think it looks too bad, especially from a front-on perspective, and due to the paint, if anything, it actually blends in with the overall aesthetic. You can see here for the actual legs, I think these two have also turned out really nice. They do in fact actually look like a far cry from how they appeared in bot mode, so that is very simplistic engineering but incredibly effective in my opinion. You can see how the Robot Mode foot does in fact actually become this knee region with the toes here at the base, and then as we take a look here towards the tail, once again this is an enormous piece, fully articulated but really nicely detailed. Now, in regards to articulation, here at the head we do in fact get a hinge joint which can look left to right. The jaw can open and close. We get a full rotation here. The arms are on ball joints, so can hinge back and forth, and we also do get a hinge joint here at the claw, unlike the original version. The same joints that we saw in the legs earlier on, and of course the same joints as far as the toe is concerned for bot mode. So overall, very nicely articulated, but once again an enormous piece. And to be honest with you, despite this being the mode that I would absolutely love to display this guy in, he's just way too big. I don't have the space in order to accommodate him, and just about have the space to in fact actually display him in robot mode. So definitely be wary of that before you do in fact decide to purchase this guy. So with all that being said, let's very quickly move on to some size comparisons, and then of course we'll proceed to wrap up with the review. Here we have the Black Mamba Scorn compared once again next to the Voyager class Scorn, as well as that Optimus Prime that came packaged with G Creations Grimlock, and you can see absolutely enormous, truly does dwarf the original Voyager version. And honestly, I actually don't think the camera's doing this guy justice in person. He is in fact a lot bigger than he's even appearing here on camera. This guy is enormous, and once again will just command so much shelf presence, as he's truly probably one of the biggest third-party pieces. I'd say in this particular form he's probably almost as big in terms of width as the HasLab Unicron, so definitely we're dealing with a massive piece. But once again, if you do have the space to accommodate him, he's really going to look awesome, in particular here in the Dino mode. But once again, I think that I'll mainly just be able to display him in bot mode, considering how massive he truly is. And so, wrapping up this review for the Black Mamba Ancient Warrior Oversized KO of Transformers The Last Knight Voyager class Scorn, in all honesty, I think in regards to robot mode as well as Dino mode, this is probably one of the best Bayverse Dinobot toys that we've ever seen released. I truly do think the original figure was absolutely fantastic, and to see it here significantly upscaled with a ton load more paint and of course a few enhancements made to both the bot and Dino mode, this truly is the best version of Scorn that we have ever seen. I really do hope that a Studio Series version can of course come out and dethrone him, but as it stands, this is a terrific piece. For those of you who wish to display him with the likes of some of your Studio Series figures, I actually think he's going to scale pretty well. You saw how he did in fact fare up to that miniature Optimus Prime. He dwarfed it, and whilst the scale definitely wouldn't be 1-to-1 in regards to a Studio Series comparison, I think it's probably the closest we're ever going to see. I don't think that if we ever were to see an official version that it would ever be this big. It'd probably be more along the lines of what we saw from the Leader Class Grimlock. So this, once again, if you're after the biggest version of the Bayverse Dinobots that you can possibly get, this is probably the best route to go with. I think in regards to the materials, for the most part, it's actually made really well. The plastic feels durable, as mentioned beforehand. There is some die cast in the torso. I think the paint is definitely where this guy excels. I'm also a huge fan of some of the LEDs they've packed into the Dino head as well as the bot mode head. I think they make this guy look all the better. And in regards to transformation, it still is as finicky as ever, but of course, if you own the original version, then you'll know exactly what to expect. And in my opinion, it results in definitely what is the best Bayverse Dino mode that we've ever seen, even being a rival for that G Creations Grimlock. I truly do think here in the Spino mode, it looks incredible. This may in fact actually be my favourite from the entire team. So with all that being said, if you are after adding this guy to your collection, as mentioned beforehand, he is available in very limited quantities over at the Icon store, and for that of course I shall pack a link down in the description box below as well as a discount code. I would love to know down in the comment section below on what you guys think of both the figure as well as the review, and until my next review, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.